Okay.
I'm in the conference room that we like to call the caged bird room because we have this rather lovely illustration on the wall. But it also used to have our photocopier in it and no windows.
I'm trying to. I thought that was Rob Ryan for a minute, the illustration, but
It is not.
I,
No,
I
it's
couldn't remember who it was. Right. Okay. Anyway, so thanks for joining us, and this is our third talk that we've done for, I guess, our celebration of illustration and fashion and drawing. And I'm just going to bring up here the page that I've got for you. Let me just
exciting. Drum roll.
share slideshow. Can you see that?
I can. I like
Yeah.
your texture.
Yeah, a rough textured, brutalist British wall. Is the only way I could kind of put it in a nice way. And basically we do a week long sort of talk and celebration of fashion and illustration and art and surviving as an illustrator is a big part of it. And I guess meeting people like you who are gonna, giving it their time, who sort of advocate for illustrators and artists and creatives. So you're a great person to speak to, and someone who with our industry that we speak to, people are always trying to get to people like you for opportunities to maybe change their life or bring them into a new sphere. And I guess so. This is, I guess, a little bit about you. And what would be quite nice is because we've spoken before about you being an illustrator. It'd be nice to give us, I guess, a bit of context to you as an illustrator and explain your sort of journey to where you are now would be really nice.
That'd be my pleasure. I mean, I think it definitely helps if agents have some kind of background in creativity, just to kind of create a bit of empathy and experience about the creative process and how to collaborate successfully. My journey started at Bristol University, or the University of the West of England, whoa, if you will, which was a modular course. And I really liked that idea because I like lots of different aspects of creativity. And that's sort of what's ultimately informed my job running an agency representing creative talent. But it meant that I could make a film, I could do ceramics, I could do printmaking, I could, check out stop motion animation at Aardman. But what I ultimately did when I first graduated was illustration, which honestly is sort of my first true love, although we've diversified into lots of other areas. And I got work fairly quickly, I think, just because I was sort of out and about and socializing and very curious. So my first job was illustrating, I think, an article for Elle magazine, but I just met the art director at a party. That led on to sort of various other editorial jobs, which of course is a great shop window for any artist. And I got a regular gig illustrating the sex column for the Times. Bet you didn't know they had one.
No.
But Hannah Betts, who's, a fairly eminent journalist, was writing for it. So that really intrigued me. And I was working at CIA at the time, and the brief would come in on a Monday. I'd get my colleagues to model for me. They were willing and consensual. And then I'd sort of pop them in the illustrations, either looking like them at their request or not. So, that was a delivery of final art by Wednesday. So, three roughs by Tuesday, pick the right one, final art by Wednesday. But it was really good to have that kind of rigor. That sort of went on to some really lovely projects for London Underground, I did a poster, which was great exposure because, that's
Yeah.
the largest gallery in the world. And sort of, I guess about 8 years ago, I was in a show called Poster Girls, which was all the female artists who'd worked for Transport for London. And I got my name on a carpet, which I consider the highest part of my career. But also, I did some lovely cards for the National Portrait Gallery that were mixed media collage, quite a big campaign for Fiat, for NatWest Bank. Yeah, so it was, and book covers and a really nice selection. But I do think being an agent helped me sort of get out there and just in front of people. So, that's sort of a mixture of marketing, socializing, being creative, being in the mix of everything. But my artists like that because they know that I really understand what they go through when, for example, an art director doesn't necessarily align with their vision. And then you go through that painful process of what may or may not water down your ideas. Sometimes it makes them much better, of course. But yeah, I don't particularly have time to illustrate anymore because I've got a couple of kids, so I tend to, do schoolwork with them.
Yeah. I think that's the toughest challenge is when kids turn up and you're trying to, I guess, navigate drawing, illustration, commercial work, kids, school, life, expenses, and so on. And I think that's when it gets a bit difficult. And then there's the business side of illustration as well. And I think trying to grapple with all of that, it's kind of, I don't know if whether we say illustration's a young man's game or a young person's sport, but I think for a lot of people, they go through university, they leave, they go into illustration, and they kind of grapple with it for many years, and then they either go into lecturing or tutoring, and they keep sort of illustration as a fun thing, so they can
Yeah.
kind of do the jobs they love rather than do everything. I remember at uni, the tutors used to say, take on everything. And as good as that advice is, you could take on a lot of rubbish as well. And I think that's the hardest task is navigating that space so you kind of start shaping a journey for you for the future and build that portfolio. So I guess that kind of so MA group. So explain a little bit about the group. I think that would be quite interesting as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing place. It's a family-owned Italian business that has beautiful bricks and mortar offices in Milan, Paris, London, New York, an affiliate in Shanghai. So all places I love and get to visit. It started off as just talent management for photographers and hairstyling and makeup and, perhaps more traditional medium or media. Then really sort of supply and demand, because they had a particularly good taste level, clients asked them to recommend strategists, creative directors, experienced designers, set designers. And so the group started expanding, hired people to run different areas. So my division is MA Art, which I started 4.5 years ago. But they also acquired a strategy agency called Culture, an experiential agency called Experiential H, a film company called Cadence, and a production company called 360, which is great for all the sort of little agencies within the agency, because then we have this wonderful collaborative model where we all help each other out, we share contacts, we kind of drive business to each other. And there's a little creative agency as well called MA Creative, which isn't quite an ad agency model. It's a bit more nimble than that, but we have kind of in-house account handlers. And then we assemble teams of artists, strategists, creative directors, specialists, whatever's required for that particular brand. And it's either sort of retained clients or it's project based. But it's really nice because it's a good community of people who absolutely love art. They really like nurturing artists, and there's a general real understanding of how challenging that can be, whether it's, the challenges of time management or how do you market yourself whilst actually doing the work, whilst curating and being discerning and not, taking on everything, sort of in a slightly more mature career. So I think, community is really important when it comes to creativity. Surrounding yourself with a support system, like-minded individuals, and also, just professionals, whether it's lawyers or agents or producers, who can really weigh in meaningfully into your kind of, your business model, whatever that may be.
Good.
Hi, Anna.
Well, no, I didn't know it was as big as that. I'd seen many parts of the discipline because I was kind of sort of helping navigate through the website, and you've kind of got the MA creative side, and then the talent, which I guess is more on your side.
Yeah.
Um,
But
and
we work closely with MA Creative, so it's kind of like on the MA talent side, you've got the doers,
yeah,
the makers, and on MA Creative side, you've got, the strategists and the thinkers.
yeah.
And that's a nice sort of ecosystem that's very complementary.
Yeah, good. And then this just grabbing into the more, I guess, photography, traditional styling, because we have a lot of people that we talk to from the fashion sector. So it's quite interesting to see some of this area,
Yeah,
what was going into magazines, editorials, advertising. So, this area is really nice. And like you were saying, you're kind of weaving between both, or well, lots of different spaces. So you'll be fed by some of these magazine people, and you'll build up that network. And I think that's quite nice to see from, I guess, illustrators who are more into fashion, as we spoke about Nuno and his understanding of you having a sort of an open mind to what's happening in fashion, where some of the more illustration agencies, and this is the hardest part, is the illustration agencies looking just like a set of illustrators who maybe just do children's books and things like that. So I guess finding the right agent, because a lot of artists or illustrators who've been in the industry for quite a while, even like Nuno, who we've spoke about, have spoken to myself and were like, any suggestion on where I should be with an agent? And I think what's quite nice looking at you is you really appeal to the audience that we talk to, which is people who understand fashion and understand culture, and then people who love great illustration as well that goes with it. So you're sort of a rare find in the market because it's hard to, you've got art partner and people like that, but they don't really work with the illustrators. They really work with the photographers,
right.
where you
Yeah.
actually have a section for set designers and artists and creatives. Um, and I think that's really nice to see. And it's kind of a bit of a rarity, and that interplay of the both. So I feel that there's a real big audience of who I talk to really maybe didn't know about you or will know about you now, who you'll come onto their sort of spectrum, and also students. We talk to a lot of students from universities, the Royal College, SGAD, all these sort of SCSM, Marangoni, who I lecture at as well, and Condé Nast. Um, you've got this new wave of people coming through, so it's nice to sort of hear. And when I mentioned about you to some of the students, they knew who you were, so that was quite nice to hear
Good to
that they
hear.
they they had heard. Well, because you could mention 10 agencies and they wouldn't know who they were, and it was quite interesting that they knew who you were. So that was a really sort of important thing to hear, I guess. And then there's this sort of other side, which is the illustration side, which you have a great sort of understanding and a respect for, and you know, it is. I guess the thing I'd be wanting to know is how do I, or how does someone get on your radar?
Yeah. I mean, it's fairly straightforward. We've all got heaving inboxes, but generally people will come to me through a personal recommendation from another artist or a client. And we always respond, even if the answer is probably not quite right for us, maybe try these three agencies. And I've been in the industry for 30 years, so I know most of the
Yeah,
other agents at this point in time. Or, we're always out and about at industry events. I did a consultancy for one of our illustrators this morning, and she felt that she was sort of a bit too long in the tooth to be entering competitions. But actually, it's a really good meritocracy and a good curation of some of the best artwork. You look at artists like Emiliano Ponzi,
yeah,
Olaf Hayek. Those are incredible artists who are constantly busy and have to turn work down, but they're just marketing machines as well. They're really on top of their social media. They're reaching out to people through their socials. They do the competitions. They lecture. Emiliano's lecturing at SVA on Mondays at the moment. They're really deeply involved with the community in lots of different ways. Got an amazing intern called Valentina at the moment who we're planning to hire. And I just met her at an artist's opening at the Society of Illustrators. And I think actually to your point, Patrick, that for me is such a pleasure kind of having the MA group and learning more about the fashion world and beauty and being in that luxury part of the industry that does actually commission a lot of illustration and CGI, and they're quite experimental. There's a lot of creative tech opportunity, but also having this deep, long-standing appreciation for just the pure craft of illustration, of beautiful draftsmanship, like your and Pat Vale's work. And then, sort of navigating trends. Like we did a consultancy for Marc Jacobs last week. And the head of social used to work at The Face magazine, which is, my
yeah.
fave. National Portrait Gallery has an exhibition opening next month, by the way, celebrating the face. So I will be there, Patrick, if you
Right,
want to
let me
come.
know.
It opens March 20th. But and we were sort of talking about one of our manga Studio Ghibli based artists, Annie Choi, who's hot
Yeah,
stuff at the moment. But just sort of through curiosity and questioning, discovered that they've been doing retailtainment where people come in with photos of their pets, and there's live drawing of people's pets. For another client, we're currently going to be doing illustrations of people trying on outfits in store because retailtainment is, so
yeah,
big, gets foot traffic into the store, but then there's also, a data capture, so that continues a digital engagement. And I like that kind of play where you're sort of asking questions, you're working out what opportunities might be coming for other artists. So actually, Stan Chow, not his core business, but he does amazing pet portraits, usually just for friends. And so my aspiration is that I get him a Marc Jacobs dog campaign, like dogs wearing Marc Jacobs. I don't know, but it's that's sort of the fun side of the business. And when it gets playful, and you can kind of share that joy and just goofiness with a community of artists who might be working on their own. Not everybody is in a shared studio. They might be ruminating and have creative block or whatever. It's sort of again the power of community, whether you're cultivating that community or you're participating in it. it's sort of everything, really.
Yeah. No. Good. Good. Lots of, I guess, good information. And
Don't know
then,
how we got onto dog portraits, but there we go.
well, funnily enough, a lot of the illustrators that I have been speaking to, especially fashion ones. There's one Jo Bird who I speak to. She's doing lots of dog portraits. But one person, Hiroshi Tanabe, who's a famous
Yeah,
Japanese illustrator, he did a load of bag drawings for Marc Jacobs. And he was big when I was a student. And I think, like I've managed to speak to you, it took me about 3 years to get him to talk to me. We managed to speak and we got on really well, and we had a good discussion about what he's up to. And it's amazing how these illustrators over time, how they have to keep pivoting. And I think that's what's quite interesting to see about his work and who he worked. He's doing work with Anna Sui, and he's been a really interesting character to kind of look at, and always trying to be creative, always pushing the boundaries. And I think that's the hardest part about being an illustrator
yeah,
is is staying consistent, but also being relevant, and and you've got to keep going. As you know,
yeah,
it is it's constant.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think that's you can never let your foot off the gas as an illustrator. I think it's as a commercialized. I think that's because you kind of move into that commercial space, or you hope to
yeah.
move into the space, depending on where you are in the illustration road. And then I guess on the other side, because Patrick Vell, who we both have met and he's spoken on here, is to see how illustrators are moving in, like you mentioned about in-store illustration and also, I guess, mural illustration. And I think that's a really interesting place that you've sort of been pushing into, I think, through Patrick's work. And you can explain that a bit.
Yeah, I mean, again, sort of studying in Bristol, I cultivated, quite an appreciation for street art. I'm one of the few people who's actually met Banksy, haven't seen him for a while. But, a lot of the really amazing artists like Deface, Shepherd Fairey, Faith 47, Faust, some of them are on my books, which is a real privilege. That's sort of one side of the industry. And when you see those beautification projects, and we were involved with the Windward Walls and various other really impactful initiatives, even if they are for real estate developers, that becomes quite meaningful. Pat is working on a huge, I think it's like 100 feet long mural for Philadelphia at the moment. Through a friend of his, real estate developer, lovely man, constantly in a bow tie. But Pat, given the nature of his personality, he really excavates the history of the place, and he's curious about the people who live there. So, he's selected 10 influencers or people of interest from Philadelphia, and he's going to be telling their story in the mural. So it's this sort of beautiful gift to the city, that's going to spruce up an otherwise, pretty boring wall. But the real estate developers also want to do a murals festival. So we've introduced them to the Montreal Murals Festival, and hopefully that will create more opportunity
Yeah.
for other artists. There's a brand that has an HQ in Philadelphia. This just came completely randomly, by the way. And connecting those dots, this brand wants to do some murals, and they have quite big budgets as well, which could help facilitate the murals festival. So, that becomes a really fun space. Sometimes we're doing murals for big corporations, and that can be quite remunerative. It's anywhere between sort of $25,000 at the lower end of the scale to $400,000 at the upper end, which, that can fulfill some dreams for a little while to,
Yeah.
go off and create a book or do something that isn't perhaps quite so remunerative, and makes the world look lovely.
More interesting. Yeah, and it was interesting what you were saying there because I think uh, your role now is almost a conduit at this sort of not a facilitator is kind of like juggling it a bit, but it's quite nice that you're seeing almost like an art director, visionary person who's saying, here's Pat, he's an illustrator, he draws murals, and there's an event maybe over there, and then there's a person who wants this, and you kind of grab them all. And you were talking about this sort of community building. It's almost like we know we all need money to motivate the projects and to keep them moving. And if we could bring it all together like in a group hug, things happen
Yeah,
and they happen in a good spirit. And if you bring the right people to the mix, I think great things are happening. And I think sometimes people don't see that from agents. They see them
right.
as they have this weird vision of what an agent can do. But I think a good one, and I've met a few, not tons, but a few, and they're really thinking creatively all the time, and they're almost like imagining what you could do. And I
Yeah,
think that's what a really good agent is doing, is kind of imagining what you could do and kind of pushing you into that space and saying, and then when someone comes and you say, oh, right, this person potentially could do that. And I think
yeah,
that's a nice approach from an agent. They're kind of helping nurture you in the right pathway. And I think that's a sort of an added value to what an agent brings to the table. And I think that's a part that you've just mentioned tonight that's kind of triggered in my head that sometimes people don't see from agents. They kind of, they might get you jobs and they just deal with the crap but and the problems. But on the other side is they're sort of thinking about, right, I want to make this big cake and all of these different variables that come to it. And
yeah,
things happen over a long period of time. I think that's the other thing is an agent knows about something and they're just waiting for the wave to come in and then throw all the surfers on it and all the tools and stuff. And it kind of just happens. So it is quite a nice, I guess it's a really good space for you as a sort of an overseer to kind
yeah,
of to shape these sort of like when you were talking there and I could see going, and this is going to happen, it's very different from what I imagine sometimes an agent does, which is pick up the phone, deal with the request, pass on the lead. And yeah, so that's kind of a different role to an agent. But I have met different agents who've kind of been alongside your pathway, which is, there's an event and there's this artist and I can imagine this artist, and they're kind of imagining. So it's quite nice to hear you sort of saying it in that tone of voice and that spirit, which is refreshing to hear, I guess, from my side. Um, and then what I did is I just grabbed some of the illustrators that you kind of represent, and what would be kind of interesting is to think about because there's sort of a variety on there. Like I think I've
yeah.
got a few, and it's kind of not there isn't some agents that I see or agencies, they have a real sort of tone as if what
Got a
I
house
went to
style kind
a
of
house
thing.
style. Like when I went to Kingston, we used to call it the Kingston style. And if you go to Brighton, you'd have the Brighton style, that sort of whimsical illustration-y style. So we always had these sort of styles that happen. And then when you kind of go to what you represent, um, there's like a whole array of styles. There is,
Yeah.
I couldn't describe the style. And I think is that through choice or
It's
what?
very intentional. I mean, this is my fourth agency. I built and sold another agency that I worked at for 22 years. So I sort of had a lot of expansion opportunity. But with this agency, which was really sort of more my initiative, I was kind of grandfathered into previous agencies. I wanted to have the absolute best in class in each particular style. So, you've got amazing Alex Gallagher up on screen. She's an oil painter who's managed to sort of be able to create her style digitally, but she still does murals, she does textile design, wallpapers, augmented reality wallpapers, which are just incredible. Annie Choi. I just kept seeing her work popping up on socials because she's got a big following. And that Studio Ghibli style, anything manga influenced, is really popular. But what she brings to the party is this incredible imagination. She's got a background as a creative director, but a lot of the times, she's just worked with Hermes, Louis Vuitton, Helmut Lang. They'll give her an open brief because she brings this sort of fantastical storytelling and narrative. So with Helmut Lang, creative director Peter just said, hey, listen, have a look at our new spring collection. Can you do, 4 stories that are sort of New York themed? And she came up with a campaign that was the best performing social campaign of all time on TikTok and Instagram. Andrew Banneker, I've repped him for something like 25 years, just has beautiful textures to his work. All the landscapes and the character development are really fantastical. They're cute, they're appealing. He works fast. Again, he's got a background as a creative director in advertising. So, he has this incredibly professional manner, doesn't mind doing, several rounds of revisions, but he thinks conceptually as well.
Mm.
I mean, I could go on and on, but there's something utterly unique about each of these talents, and a lot to be celebrated as well. And of course, you're looking at their marketability and what are the opportunities for them, whether it's packaging, or a big ad campaign or retailtainment, doing workshops in store or big murals, or collaborating with some of our creative tech talent to do some sort of augmented reality campaign to launch a perfume or a new, booze brand.
Yeah.
They're all really different and unique and
Yeah.
amazing.
Well, here's a few others. And they're really
Michaela
so
Pichu, she's
different.
amazing. Such enthusiasm, a woman who's not afraid to try a new medium as well.
Mm.
Like,
James
that's a
Joyce.
neon piece. She was one of the first of our artists to go on the Vegas sphere, actually, which is, I
Wow.
forget what the footage of that great big ball in Vegas is, but it's something like 188 feet high. That's a
Wow.
lot of canvas to cover. And actually, we'll be able to announce next month a new artist who's going to appear on Sphere for Earth Day and also judge a student competition, which Michaela did last year with Rafiq Anadol. So that's
Wow.
another fun thing as an agent. We're agency of record for very strange companies like the Vegas Sphere, but then we're looking at, what does retail look like inside Sphere? What are the multi-sensory experiences? What about food and beverage, bringing in companies like Bumpus and Par?
Yeah.
When Grateful Dead is performing, what are the merch opportunities that go alongside that? So it
Yeah.
gets
So
pretty creative.
there's a real brain behind the action, and I think that's the real. I don't know, because I kind of it is good to hear this sort of like you could do this, and that I think that's the hustler side of a good illustrator as well. Is they kind of go, oh, you could do this, you could do that. They're kind of not sitting there. They're kind of being proactive in the process of, oh, you could do this. There's an opportunity into that. There's this. What about that? This could become a book. The book could become something in augmented reality. We could then make it into a game. And they're like, and then you just say the only thing that stops us is money. That's it.
Yeah.
Creativity is the problem here. It's only finance. And I think that's usually our barrier is only money ever, because we could make it as creative as you want. And I think that's quite a nice way to consider how to sort of pitch the idea to the client is always, and you know, you're kind of always just listening to you. There is that sort of freshness of like, "Oh, I could try this, do this," and that's after how many years have you done? 25, 30 years?
30 years, which
30
is
years.
terrifying. Three
And
decades.
that's amazing to hear that, you know, you've kind of still there flying the flag. And, you know, you were saying, I'm going to the book, I'm doing this, you know, sort of running around and staying in that space and networking and navigating that space is quite a complex thing. And it's really good to kind of see. And then, you know, I was just brought up here some of the different locations that you represent as a business, and it's kind of nice to see these sort of figureheads. I guess these are the main fashion zones as well, which is
Right.
quite funny from a fashion perspective. You know, if we're thinking, and I saw recently they were talking about and we had spoke about it lightly about incomes coming from Fashion Week. And I don't know if you saw because we were talking about London and Paris and Milan. So I think Paris over Fashion Week generates nearly 450 million pounds.
Yeah.
If you think of
Yeah.
London makes 20.
What?
So
Wow.
so
Okay.
during Fashion Week, money generated during that period of time in London is 20 million, where Paris was 450 million, Milan was second, and New York was 160 million generated.
Yep.
Look, it's unbelievable. London, a real what we would call a creative hub, it really hasn't got itself together from a financial ownership, you know. And I think London is a really tough place to tackle, and I think London needs to game up somehow from its.
I think London is still very much a creative hub. I mean, most of our artists are based in the UK. I've been based in New York for 20 years now. So, and I definitely have a global perspective. But it's an epicenter of creativity still. And when you look at UL and Central St Martin's and, all of the London College of Communication, you know, the education there is still second to none. I think sort of economically, it's quite a challenging time in Britain. So, that's the value of an agent. If you have somebody who can be your advocate, who, has feet on the ground in these and knowledge of these different marketplaces, it's very advantageous. Interestingly, Paris, the Parisian luxury brands, is quite a big part of our illustration business,
Yeah,
particularly CGI and illustration, creative tech as well. Just speaking from my sort of MA art division. And it's mainly me doing the meetings and selling there, actually. I mean, we do have people obviously on the ground there. Um, but I think that there is just in Paris in particular, it's such a deep-seated fashion hub. And I also think Paris is having a moment. They had heads of digital and creative tech before other brands did. And so, they are that little bit ahead. I know NFT is a dirty word these days, but NFT Paris blew me away because it was beautifully curated. It was in a great venue, with cheesy, but views of the Eiffel Tower for people who are traveling from all over the world. That's not lost on them.
yeah,
And I think the guy who created NFT Paris was like 19 or something.
wow,
And there were definitely sort of areas of growth there in terms of kind of flow and ticketing. Um, but Paris, just the taste level,
yeah,
they do things very, very well. But Milan also, like retailtainment, that's kind of the epicenter for that. It's very much about a sort of personal touch. And how do you build value and real engagement that goes beyond, just a shopping experience? How do you turn those customers into brand advocates? And you can get quite sort of, hands-on and meaningful about that. I think one of the funniest projects I've worked on, and also one of the most successful, was a cocooning series for Laura Piana and MA Creative, our agency of record for them, and have been for about 5 years. Sort of, the initial engagement was to take the brand beyond being known for creating, very soft cardigans from their sheep llama hybrid that's copyrighted
Yeah.
into, what's a meaningful lifestyle brand with a bit more kind of Gen Zennial appeal. But we did a series of workshops in Laura Piana stores across the world, and also, beautifully curated venues where quite small groups of people, about 30 at a time, who granted had a large expendable income, would go in and they would learn how to do watercolor illustration with Namoko in Japan, or they would learn ceramics with, sort of a local ceramicist in London. I can't remember who we actually found, but there was this sort of Patrick Swayze style potter who, did some pottery with some folks in Paris. And it's really fun, and it's fun for the artisans to come in and speak to a small audience. And those gigs, oh, and actually, Jessica May Underwood, who is an illustrator and sometimes agent, she's got two of these children things going on at the moment, so she stepped back from agenting. But she went into the Laura Piana store in Paris and did all these amazing watercolor illustrations live of people's handbags. Because if you're going to spend 20 grand on a handbag, you probably want to have a live personalized illustration. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it just sort of speaks to the fun of how far can you push ideas to
No,
make
it
brands
does.
a bit interesting and create lovely opportunities for artists.
And I guess before we finish, what would be nice? Well, I'd be interested, uh, aspirational wise. Um, what would be a really good project that you would like to work on that you think this would be the best thing I could do?
I have an immediate answer to that because I was speaking at a Sephora conference last week, and we were kind of doing blue sky thinking. So it is a bit brand specific, but I would love to cross-pollinate a really iconic, thoughtful brand that creates interesting content with a museum like the Met that, obviously has this rich heritage of the Met Gala, but incredible exhibitions. They do internships. They've got a great teen program. We helped create an app for them that had this sort of Pokemon Go style activation to engage kids to actually want to stay beyond 20 minutes in a museum, and actually was highly effective because kids ended up staying for 4 hours or more. I'd love to bring in that sort of retailtainment type experience where artists are connecting with the exhibitions that are on in that particular museum, but doing workshops for all ages, from 4 through to 104, to cultivate that creativity and community. And meanwhile, you find a way for that to live digitally and online so that you're amplifying those kind of situations. So for Sephora, there's an amazing Black Artists of Egypt show at the moment. Sephora have an incubator program to help sort of, diversity and inclusion in mind to help young creatives incubate products. So, beauty products. You look at amazing people like Isamaya French, who's got a lipstick range, or Pat McGrath, who's got $1 billion beauty company. That's to sort of have some kind of like beauty workshop doing Cleopatra makeup or,
Yeah.
just something daft that makes education relevant and meaningful for a younger or any demographic. And sort of, yeah, just building relevance around education, brands, creativity. I think that's the sweet spot.
Because I remember I did a workshop at the V&A. The V&A does quite a lot of these.
Oh,
We
they're
did it with,
great.
I
Yeah.
did one
Yeah.
for Dior
Exemplary.
where we designed a scarf and then we hand rolled the scarves at the end. So it was like a 3 week. You went to the exhibition, you were inspired by the exhibition. I showed them how to illustrate something from the show and then make a scarf, and then we printed them and hand rolled them at the end. So they had an outcome as well and saw the sort of the journey of designing a scarf for Dior. I think that magical experience is good, and I think like you're talking is through workshops, through these, and I think the V&A have sort of nailed that. I think they've really,
Yeah.
and I think maybe the Met and MoMA. I don't know if MoMA does enough. I don't know. Kids go there for school, but I don't know if they do these bigger, more
Yeah,
rigorous ones.
they've got a good active kids program, and there is a teen program, and also at the Whitney. But with thoughtful and meaningful brand collaboration, and again, I don't know quite the logistics behind that. If you're conflating commerce and art, sometimes that can get into sort of funny territory. But I think making education relevant and truly engaging, and for anyone to sort of have some kind of outcome that's tangible, that becomes really interesting. They used to do art battles at the V&A. Do they
Yeah.
still do those?
I don't know if they still do. I remember them like, and Friday night late. I think they bring in a lot and then they kind of test it for a while. And then if the head of the V&A, the creative section moves, then that idea gets swamped and then something new comes in. So I guess these little battles and things are great concepts. And I
Yeah,
think they need to be a little bit more. They're doing a bit more of it with music at Tate. Tate did it. I know uh, PS1 did it as well. MoMA
yeah,
PS1. They do it. So they have these sort of like the offshot sort of museums that are a bit more smaller. They
right.
could be more playful with them. But the V&A was always a good one for pushing that and breaking down the barriers. But I don't know. The National Portrait does some stuff, but it's still very, as you're saying, they feel quite tight. And I feel, as you say, they're very controlled. But in the UK, we have lots of discussions now because the BP Awards, petroleum. So who should sponsor these awards?
Right.
And just things like that. So it's just like you're saying, getting that right partner, whether it's through beauty or through Windsor and Newton or whoever it is. I'm sure there's many companies that would be fantastic.
Be
And
the modern day Medici's kind of
yes,
thing. Uh,
yeah, I think there is a space for it. But as you say, it's I think like if you think it and you write it down, and I think from you saying it, there's a good chance it's gonna happen.
right. Yeah.
So I
I
think
think
I'm looking forward to seeing it now.
Yeah. I'll finish on this because this is one of the daftest jobs I've ever worked on. We helped the Guggenheim rebrand and designed a logo and some collateral with Shepard Fairey's design agency, Studio Number One. And Shepard mentioned that he'd like to DJ the Guggenheim. So we put it out there to them. Can he come in and do a set for, I think it was called Art After Dark. His fee is 2 grand or whatever. So that happened. And we happened to be making a documentary called Spheres at the time that was really about, sort of circles of influence. So from the Dadaists to the Surrealists, artists have always influenced each other, whether it's in coffee shops or with absinthe or whatever. And we had amazing people like Justin Theroux, Scott Campbell, the tattoo artist. And we said, look, could we film Shepard Fairey being interviewed in the Guggenheim? And this is like years before I understood about permitting and had been through that agony. Literally within the hour, because they wanted to get younger people into the Guggenheim, I had a one sheet giving me permission to film in the Guggenheim the next day. And so we had this amazing interview with Shepard that sort of led on to other interviews that will ultimately inform what is an unfinished documentary at this stage. But it's just fun, I mean, it doesn't hurt to ask, does it?
I think like you, as we said, we'll end on this, but I think just asking, all they can do is say no.
Right.
And I think that's the simple one. Right, Louisa, thank you so much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for
I know it's the beginning of your day and it's the end of mine, or it's sort of the beginning of your day. But thanks so much for your time, and I'll be speaking to you anyway. But this is great, and this will be great to share to everybody, and they'll be super happy to hear more. And thanks for your time and all your great knowledge and energy. So thanks again, Louisa, and have a great day.
Brilliant. Thanks to you, and thank you to all my artists for inspiring me every single day. They're
Yes,
amazing.
thank you. Super. Have a lovely day. Bye bye.
Bye for now.
Bye bye.